We will now start our questions with Mr. Caputo. 6 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. And I echo your sentiments where you thank our security services and responders for foiling what sounds like it would have been a serious terrorist attack that would have impacted Canadians. Now, Minister, to be clear here, this person who is charged with terrorism offenses with his son, he arrived in February of 2018, correct? I'm going off the information you gave me, Minister.
Yes, in February 5th, 2018, the subject entered Canada at Pearson Airport.
And he made an asylum claim in June of 2018, correct?
Yes, he went to an immigration department office and made that asylum claim.
And he was granted citizenship in May of 2024, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And provided a work permit in September of 2018. That was that was the initial basis on which he was able to legally be in Canada. Is that right?
Yes, that appears correct from the chronology before the committee.
Okay. Permanent resident of September of 2021. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Now, you wrote me a letter on August 12th of this year stating none of this. So I'm just going to note here for the record that you said, Minister, that we couldn't comment on any of this, and then lo and behold, here today we have this vast chronology that has appeared just before committee. It seems odd that you would say you couldn't give us any of this information, and that here today we have all of this information from you. What we have here, Minister, is obviously a colossal failure. I'll be direct. How did somebody slide under the radar for so long, 2018 to 2024?
So just with respect to your initial comment, you're right. In August, I thought it was important, and I asked, as did my colleague Mark Miller, our officials to produce the detailed chronology. So I wanted to make sure that when we came to this committee and are able to talk about this publicly, we had the precise chronology that we could all rely on. So
that's not what you said in your letter, though, sir. You said in your letter that there was an ongoing investigation, and yet here we have this information. I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on how did this person fly under the radar for 6 years?
So this person entered Canada on the dates that you described, Mr. Caputo, and as are reflected in the chronology. The security services, CBSA, CSIS, and the Immigration Department did all of the existing security checks and the normal security checks, and including biometrics by the RCMP on a number of occasions. And there was, at the time that those decisions were made, no information that would have come to light to trigger what happened earlier this spring in terms of CSIS's investigation.
In fact, we actually had to hear from a foreign government about this. Isn't that right? That CSIS got information from a foreign government has been reported by Global?
You have been, Mr. Caputo, at this committee for some time. You know that the intelligence agencies are not going to ever discuss the sources of intelligence or information they get from partner agencies. First of all, it may be illegal to disclose that, but it's also very dangerous to the women and men who do that work, either at CSIS or in their partner agencies, to confirm the sources of this information. So I'm not able to give a definitive answer on that question, and you know that very well.
Equally as troubling as that answer is the fact that we as Canadians did not have this intelligence for ourselves. How is it that foreign governments know more than we do on Canadian soil?
I don't accept the premise of that comment. Every intelligence agency collaborates with partners around the world. The most effective and the most renowned intelligence cooperation would be the Five Eyes countries, of which, as you know, Canada is a member. And the information is shared between these security services on an hourly and daily basis, precisely because it makes our country safer, but we can also contribute and do often, and the great work done by CSIS, to the security of our partner countries as well. So that's a very normal security process that you understand very well.
With all due respect, Minister, you need to stop deflecting and start divulging. At this point here, you're saying, you're not even confirming it, How is it that a foreign government knew more than we did in Canada about somebody that was on Canadian soil for 6 years? How is that?
But, Mr. Caputo, perhaps I wasn't clear in the previous answer. You understand very well, and I'm happy to ask the interim director of CSIS to explain the reasons why it is inappropriate, if not illegal, to answer questions around specific intelligence products, and more so because this is an ongoing criminal case. Some of this evidence, the prosecutors in their judgment may decide to bring before a court, before a jury at some future prosecution.
I'm not talking about the evidence. I'm talking about how the evidence was gathered. How is it that a foreign government knew more than our own government? That's what I'm talking about, not the evidence, sir. At the end of the day, this is what we have. We have somebody that came in here and was here for 6 years flying under the radar. We don't know whether this happened before, and we have no assurances from you whether or not this will happen again. You've deflected, you've diverted, and you've denied, and that is absolutely inexcusable to this point. Canadians deserve answers, and we are getting none. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Caputo. The minister can answer if he wishes.
Mr. Caputo can repeat those phrases and those words. It doesn't make them true. What you have here, Mr. Chair, is a case where 2 individuals were arrested and are now in custody facing 9 very serious criminal charges. This was a situation that could have presented a serious risk to the safety of Canadians, and CSIS and the RCMP and other police partners did phenomenal work. I am fortunate enough as the Minister of Public Safety, as I said, to be updated, to be briefed from time to time on some of these significant cases. That was the case for me on July 24th, and 4 days later, these people were in police custody. So I saw up close the very effective work that the RCMP, CSIS, and others did. So the premise that somehow this person flew under the radar, this person was arrested and is facing criminal charges and is in jail before any risk was presented to Canadians. And that's exactly the kind of work that we rely on our police services, the RCMP, and their partners like CSIS to do every day. And I'm proud of that work.
Thank you, Minister. We go now to Mr. McDonald. Please go ahead. 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here today and all your surrounding support. Minister, look, it's obviously a red flag for Canada and our government and all Canadians, and it's ensuring to hear some of your remarks. I do take issue sometimes when the opposition members say that other international security agencies knew more than we did, and certainly I'm for one to say, well, I'm not really too worried on who knows what, but as long as we, foiled a terrorist plot in this country, it doesn't matter. And I'm glad the Five Eyes all work together, including Canada, and in every regard. But Minister, Canadians need to understand and want to know, what's our interest in the details in this case are obvious, but we also want to ensure procedural fairness for a successful prosecution. So can you just elaborate on the processes that we're going to follow here so Canadians in layman terms can understand how we're going to get to the end of this and ensure that it never happens again?
So, Mr. McDonald, thank you for the question. Thank you for joining us, I hope, from the great province of Prince Edward Island this morning. And you're absolutely right. As my colleague, the Minister of Immigration, has said, and I have said the same thing, and the officials with me today are working on precisely that, a review of all of the steps surrounding this case with the relevant dates to understand exactly who knew what and when. And are there changes or adjustments that need to be made in terms of these screening protocols? Our adversaries, threat actors that are seeking to do harm to Canada or to do harm to Canadians, are constantly evolving their measures and adjusting their measures. CSIS has talked about this publicly. So obviously, the public safety portfolio and the agencies in the portfolio are also evolving measures to ensure that we have the very best measures in place to ensure the safety of Canadians. Mr. McDonald, your specific question around what reviews are taking place to ensure that we have this information Perhaps Mr. Gallivan from the Border Services Agency or Ms. Lloyd from CSIS can talk about briefly the work they're doing. And of course, our colleagues at the Immigration Department are doing that same work and in some cases overlapping with us. Perhaps Mr. Gallivan could add something?
Just in terms of the review, so we're both reviewing these specific individuals and backtesting what occurred, were procedures followed, and if procedures were followed, what changes to procedures may be required. We're also taking a representative sample of closed files that were similarly screened positive to see, in light of the information available today, whether there are changes to the procedures needed. And then, as the minister said, there's 3 lines of defense. The CBSA's first involvement is actually in the security screening process before people are issued a visa or status in Canada. In 2023, 7,000 people had various levels of concern expressed through that process. We have liaison officers situated around the world. Before people get on a plane, roughly 7,500 people were no-boarded before they even got on a plane to Canada. And then kind of from a CBSA perspective, when you arrive in Canada in 2023, 35,000 people allowed to leave did not enter the country, and roughly 3,500 people, because of serious inadmissibility concerns, which are not just national security but organized crime and others, were stopped. And so I think what I'm trying to say is we do have checks and balances that work thousands of times a year, but we're asking ourselves the same tough questions about were the procedures followed, and if they were and didn't catch this individual, could different procedures catch them in the future?
Mr. Chair, if there's time, perhaps Ms. Lloyd can talk about CSIS doing some of that work in partnership as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the service has an important work in the security screening process, and I can provide assurances to the committee that the existing procedures are robust and that we take the time and necessary effort with the information available at the time to treat every file seriously to make sure we adequately and effectively execute our mandate and authorities under the security screening mandate of the CSIS Act. Thank you.
Mr. McDonald, you have a minute and a half left, or a minute and a quarter.
Thank you. Look, recently we've seen another jurisdiction, as recently as last week, I believe it was in Germany, where individuals have attempted to carry out terrorist acts in the name of Islamic State. Can anyone there speak to the experience or lessons that we may have learned from that situation?
Mr. Chair, I see Deputy Commissioner Larkin reach for a piece of paper. That may very well be because he has something he could add to that question. Brian, are you able to offer something?
Thank you, Mr. Minister. In that particular incident, no specific information, but generally speaking, as this committee would be well aware, the national security context, terrorism cases across the globe are becoming much more complex, much more frequent. I do want to highlight within Canada, though, the violent extremism is significantly on the rise. Between April 1st, 2023 and March 31st, 2024, where the RCMP has laid 83 charges against 25 accused persons, and 7 of those being young persons, which is concerning around the ideology and the radicalization. And when you look at this from a larger perspective, the number of charges year over year, 488% increase. And so the global context is changing significantly. It's something within the RCMP that we continue to evolve. Our integrated national security teams across the country, particularly located in large urban areas, to actually combat this. But as Mr. Gallivan and Madame Lloyd indicated, the important partnership is with our Five Eye partners and that global connection. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On y va maintenant, Monsieur Fortin. Monsieur Fortin, allez-y, s'il vous plaît, 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, thank you for being with us today. I believe that everyone agrees that this is an alarming situation. Obviously, it is possible to point fingers at people for certain gaps. And that is why our committee is trying to figure out what is going on. You spoke about the normal security screening processes which were adhered to. In the case of both the father and the son, normal processes were carried out. Can you confirm this, Minister? Mr. Fortin, the process in partnership with IRCC, because they're the ones who receive applications, the normal processes were followed in the case of both the father and the son, as Mr. Gallivan said. That said, we are carrying out a review to determine whether in these cases the security agencies could have found or identified something. And if that turns out to be the case, we will put in place measures to correct it. This is a continuous improvement process. You spoke about certain cases where there's a screening or a filtering carried out, and where IRCC will determine whether there's a need for a more in-depth screening. Can you confirm that you stated this in your opening remarks? Yes, that's correct, Mr. Fortin. Officials at IRCC receive applications. Mr. Gallivan could go into further details, but in certain cases, IRCC requests a more in-depth check. They might turn either to the Canada Border Services Agency or the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service to carry out further additional screening. This is how cases are normally identified. In the case of the two individuals we are speaking of, was this in-depth screening carried out or not? Was it requested and then was it carried out? To be entirely precise, because this question is at the heart of what we're studying today, I will ask Mr. Gallivan to provide details. First, I would like to note that we set out the referral criteria. So it's a partnership effort for asylum requests. Screenings are carried out for 100% of adult asylum seekers. Consistent with the chronology we submitted this morning in 2018 and 2021, the father, the accused, was subjected to a security review screening, including biometrics and a comparison of biometric data to RCMP databases. Yes, we have an automated system provided by our intelligence partners in Canada and around the world, which gives us names and scenarios and dates. Mr. Gallivan, I don't want to be impolite, but I only have about 2 minutes left and I want to use my time effectively. So you said that the in-depth security screening process was carried out in 2018 and 2021 in the case of the father. What about the son? Did the same thing happen? So twice, once in 2018, once in 2021 for the father. For the son, it was when he arrived in Canada in 2024, if I remember correctly. The son was only screened one time. So the son made his first application in July 2019, according to the chronology I have. Then he came to Canada in February 2020. Did you carry out an in-depth screening at that time? Regarding the son, he was screened when he applied for asylum at the Canadian border. The son requested a study permit in July 2019. He then came to Canada in February 2020, and he obtained a refugee status in July 2022. But you've mentioned 2024. It seems a bit delayed, Mr. Gallivan. Am I getting something wrong here? Did you get the dates mixed up? If you could please give me 1 moment to consult the chronology, I can provide you with precise information. What I can confirm is that the son was screened once through the same process under which the father was screened twice. I only have about 30 seconds left. I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Was the in-depth screening requested for both the father and the son? Also, was it carried out? And third, when was it carried out? And what were the results of the screening? For the son, I think we're experiencing some confusion. I was very clear for the father. As for the son, I will come back to you. For the father, I can confirm that he was screened in 2018 and 2021. All procedures were followed in the normal ways. And IRCC was given a positive response. Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
Now to Mr. McGregor. 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to join colleagues in thanking our witnesses and the Minister for appearing before our committee and helping guide us through this important study. Minister, my colleague Mr. Caputo touched on this. We received the documents via email, the chronology documents, only 50 minutes before the start of this committee meeting. My office, as every MP office routinely does when we're doing casework, we are often requesting chronology documents on behalf of constituents so that we can better understand the particulars of their case.
Excuse me, Mr. McGregor. I'm not sure the volume is level. Can the witnesses hear the questions? Okay, we'll turn up the volume and we'll start your time over again, Mr. McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I hope the volume is okay before I go into the questions.
It's good.
Okay, thank you. So, Minister, just on the fact that we received the email with the documents that were referred to, the chronology, we referred that email only 50 minutes before the start of this committee. And, my office routinely requests these types of chronologies to help us with the individual casework of constituents, and we often get that in very short order. So I guess a direct question to you, Minister, given how important this information is to aid this committee in a very important and now very public investigation into this matter, why did it take so long, given that the letter requesting this particular meeting, my letter was issued on August the 7th, here we are on August the 28th. Can you give us, the committee, a reason as to why these documents were given to the committee so late?
Mr. McGregor, through the chair, thank you for the question and thank you for your participation this morning. I'm happy to see you. You referred to, as all of us as constituency MPs ask for chronologies from the Immigration Department with respect to particular files. That's a process that the Immigration Department endeavors to provide. I hope that colleagues will understand in this case, you're dealing with two individuals facing 9 very serious terrorism charges, criminal charges that are currently in custody. There is an active prosecution underway and a publication ban issued by the court. So the ability of the Immigration Department or even CBSA or CSIS to simply produce a timeline necessarily has to go through the filter of the RCMP to ensure we're not prejudicing inadvertently a criminal prosecution. I know lawyers from the Department of Justice were providing advice. The public safety senior officials were getting advice from lawyers. So recognizing that it should have been here earlier, Mr. McGregor, and for that I regret, but I wanted to make sure we didn't rush something that inadvertently became in a criminal trial a reason to perhaps have an adverse finding or an adverse result. And I wanted to make sure that the RCMP and the prosecutors of the Department of Justice were comfortable that we were releasing the maximum amount of information we can without in any way endangering a criminal prosecution or risking violating a publication ban that the court has seen fit to put in place.
Thank you. Now, I want to join you in also congratulating our intelligence service, our police services in a successful arrest before what could have been a very brutal attack on Canadian soil. And I understand that multiple departments are involved in internal investigations right now. Can you give the committee and indeed Canadians who are watching this committee a sense of as Minister of Public Safety, what your expected timelines are for these internal investigations? And is there anything that you can publicly report that you've learned from this and any changes that you may have already set in motion to prevent this from happening in the future?
Mr. McGregor, thank you for that very good question. And you're right. The minute I was briefed on July 24th by senior officials of CSIS and the RCMP on this case, and then the RCMP subsequently updated me after the arrest took place, I think on July 28th, some 4 days later. The first thing that I asked officials was, tell me what processes are in place so that we can learn from this sequence of events, as I noted, and ensure that any adjustments we need to make in the screening process are imposed as quickly as possible. This work is being done with our partners at the Immigration Department. I believe the Deputy Minister of Immigration is here a little later this morning. My colleague Mark Miller will also be before this committee, I think, soon as well. The challenge is the work, because of the very integrated nature between the Immigration Department and CBSA or CSIS with respect to these screenings and information that triggers, as Ted indicated, further review. That process is necessarily going to be rigorous and thorough. I've asked them to produce for me as quickly as possible advice on what, if any, changes we need to put in place. I know my colleague, the Minister of Immigration, has also asked his officials to look with respect to the citizenship status of the father. That process also, again, I understand from comments Mr. Miller made publicly, is underway. The problem, Mr. McGregor, is the backdrop to all of this is this ongoing criminal investigation, criminal prosecution, potential further investigations that the police decide, and a publication ban. So the ability to talk about different elements of this work on the advice of lawyers and the RCMP
I want to get one final question
is very limited.
It's related to this. Just in terms of our international relations, the European Union has its own database. I believe it's referred to as the Schengen Information System. Of course, Canada has its Five Eyes. Do you believe incidents like this are going to encourage your government to pursue better collaboration with Western democracies, such as the European Union, in how we share some of that information? Do we have access to the particulars of information databases like the Schengen Information System, and how do we collaborate with those different data sets?
Critical question. I'm glad, Mr. McGregor, you asked it. The best person to, I see in some CSIS briefings references to some of this information, but Vanessa is in the best position to quickly tell you. I think she can reassure you we have access to all of the intelligence and data we need to keep Canadians safe, but specific sets of data. Vanessa, can you help Mr. McGregor, perhaps?
Mr. Chair, as the Minister referenced earlier, in the complex threat environment that we are currently facing, partnerships are a very important tool to be able to counter threats of violent extremism as well as a range of other threats. As the Minister alluded to earlier, the service has many partnerships with countries around the world. In fact, over 300 partnerships for 150 countries around the world, and that includes daily information sharing through a liaison that happens through our intelligence professionals around the world, and leveraging information that can be shared from all types of data sets and collection by those agencies.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor.